Welcome everybody to another live stream event. My name is Andy Biggs from Arizona's 5th Congressional District. I'm joined today by three very good friends, three very good public officials who are doing a great job representing their constituents and their communities. We have Jake Hoffman from the Queen Creek Town Council. We have Mark Stewart from the Chandler City Council. And we also have Jared Taylor from the Gilbert Town Council. So we're grateful to have each of them. I'm going to read just a brief little bio for each of you. First of all, for Jared Taylor, Gilbert Town Council member, Jared Taylor. He's been in the Gilbert Town Council since 2012. Recently, he was joined by Council member Amy Yentis and signed an open letter to Mayor Daniels, Town Manager Patrick Banger, and Town Attorney Chris Payne regarding some recommendations on how to open up the town of Gilbert. Jake Hoffman is a Queen Creek Council member. He also formally requested a review of what legal options are at the town's disposal to let all businesses in Queen Creek voluntarily open immediately and or protect businesses from police enforcement of the executive order mandating their closure. He was elected to council in 2016, and Mark Stewart from Chandler, along with Mayor Hartke and the entire Chandler City Council, signed and sent a letter to Governor Ducey requesting more flexibility in the executive order recently issued by Governor Ducey extending the closure time in Arizona till May 15th. He was elected in 2016 and worked with Fortune 50 organizations prior to his public service. Thank you, each and every one of you, for joining us today on our live stream. I'm grateful to have you here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So Jared, if you don't mind, let's start with you and give us a little background on why you did what you did. Well, that sounds like you did something bad. Just tell us about what you did, what was the motivation behind it, and what do you hope to see happen as a result? And then kind of then we'll go to the others, and then we'll come back and find out what the response has been.
Okay. Well, Congressman, thank you for having me here. And I've been hearing from not just mothers who are frustrated with some of the restrictions on their own families, but also small businesses with some of the restrictions. This whole idea of essential businesses is quite irritating for someone who is shut down. You know, this is their livelihood. And I think everyone's generally been understanding of what's going on, but it's definitely at a point where some things need to be changing because real data is coming in, and we're seeing that maybe the risks aren't as high as what they need to be. So Councilmember Yentis and I felt it was very, very important to put out a very specific analysis of some key problems that we're seeing and hearing from our community, and a list of recommendations that address those specific problems. We can get into that a little bit later. Because, you know, in Gilbert, at least, there's an order from the mayor where she's pretty much calling the shots right now, and it didn't happen with council input. And so I thought it was important, at least for our constituents, to know what we as council members felt was important relative to the reopening of Gilbert specifically, and how we'll support our constituents. So we outlined that, and happy to go through some of those points later on if you'd like.
You bet. Thanks, Jared. Hey, Jake, tell us about Queen Creek. You asked for a review as well, trying to protect your business owners and people who might want to exercise their liberty in Queen Creek. Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so, you know, it started for me back a couple weeks ago when they put sand all over the skate park and shut down our parks, right? And, you know, we've got a stay-at-home order in place from the governor, and I get it. He's in a very complex, you know, situation and navigating something that none of us ever expected would happen. But, you know, we've got parks are closed, we've got people staying at home, and now they can't even go outside and enjoy the public space, the public amenities that they had already paid for. And so thankfully, staff was very receptive on that situation, got the skate park cleaned up within 12 hours, within 24 hours, got all the basketball hoops back up, the volleyball nets back up, and the signs replaced from signs that said parks closed to signs that said the parks are still closed, but we recognize that it's each individual citizen's responsibility to take charge of their own health and safety and use at your own risk, right? And
Jake, was it town personnel that put the sand on the skate park and took down the basketball hoops and stuff?
it was, yeah. It was their effort. I mean, and I've talked with them. This was not something that council had voted on. It was their, perceived best effort to comply with the governor's executive order and the governor's additional guidelines that he laid out on that executive order, specifically citing certain amenities like basketball courts and skate parks and whatnot. But the town has embraced, at least from a public amenities standpoint, they embraced the philosophy that me and other members of council advocated for, which was, look, each individual citizen retains agency over their own health and safety. It's their choice, not ours to make for them. Now, when it comes to businesses, we had all been ready and waiting and eager for May 1st to roll around, right? And everybody expected that we were going to reopen and we were going to get back to normal, not a new normal, just back to normal. And unfortunately, that didn't happen. And so the day of the governor's press conference, I put in my first phone call to staff. And then the following day, I sent the letter that you were referencing. And I said, look, this is it's a constitutional issue. It's an issue of liberty. And our citizens have the right under the Constitution to peaceably assemble and to make their own choices with regards to how they operate their business and how they operate their private property. The government doesn't get to tell them that. And so one aspect was what legal options are there for us to help our businesses reopen immediately? And then the second was, how do we protect them from, undue police enforcement of the executive order? And so I've been in talks with staff, and I'm happy to get into that later. But, just to kind of cap this off, this is unprecedented in terms of the amount of control that even what we would view, relatively speaking, compared to states like California and Nevada, Michigan, and New York, even in a good state, this is an unprecedented level of governmental control and infringement into our lives and liberties.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, I know that you had to work hard, because anytime you're trying to put 7 folks together on a letter to the governor, it's probably took some time, and it was a little bit difficult because everybody has different ideas. But you guys wrote a letter to the governor. Tell us kind of what the objective was and what was the substance of the letter.
So yeah, it's good stuff. I love the comment that Jake was just talking about as it relates to self-governance. And we live in a representative form of government. And what I've been grateful for in Chandler is that throughout this entire process, our mayor, where a lot of mayors in Phoenix and other places that neighbor us, took emergency power and ceded the power within the mayorship. Our mayor never did that. Our mayor continued to consult council and continue to ask questions, and we meet every week. We're on the phone. Council members are talking with one another, not necessarily about policy, but about where things are headed. But the letter, to get 7 people aligned on what type of verbiage to use when not everybody was on the same page on whether or not we wanted to send a letter on behalf of our community and our business owners was a challenge. The reality is that our community understood, and I'm getting a lot of feedback, that you can both be conscious about your health care and you can be conscious about the economy at the same time. And when that feedback was coming in from our small business community, I think all of our council members heard it and loud and clear. And we wanted to express that to the governor. I think the governor had heard regularly from politicians and from media that we needed to shut it down. And I don't think he was hearing the other side of the coin from small business owners. And we wanted to support that because while the media and maybe politicians shut the state down, the people are going to open it up. And that's what we're seeing happening. I'm just grateful that I work with such a great council that believes in liberty, that believes in the Constitution, and understands a representative form of government to be able to address that with the governor. And I think it was received well. And so that happened last Friday. We made an announcement about it on Monday. Hopefully that nudged the governor to speed up the opening of the state just a little bit. And again, we are going to be conscious of safety. in Chandler. I think the new brand for business owners is going to be safety. Like, it doesn't matter what the window decal says. If you don't have hand sanitizer and masks on your staff, the public and the consumer will make a decision on whether or not they're going to shop there or stop shopping there. So that's what we did.
Yeah, hey, thanks. So all three of you have been very proactive in trying to advocate for opening up the economy, and Mark made allusion to our neighbors next door, who maybe have been a little bit, and when I say next door, I mean California, have been a little bit more draconian in their approach than us, even though we're not used to this kind of thing. But what has struck me is that too many people who are in an elected position believe that they have power. You don't have power. You have authority. You have authority delegated to you by the people who you represent. And so when the constituency elects you, they don't say, and you can do anything you want. They delegate authority to you to take certain acts within the charter or constitution that governs you. And so many of our elected officials have kind of exceeded that, in my opinion. So I'm really grateful that you guys proactively tried to do this, because the other thing that both Jake and Jared alluded to, I think is absolutely, and what Mark did as well, is absolutely important to remember. Not only do the people govern themselves and they delegate authority to the government's role is actually to protect their rights. And it is up to the people to understand that there are risks in exercising those rights. And we all take that upon ourselves. So if I want to stay in because I feel insecure, or I feel like I don't want to go to a retailer that maybe is not practicing social distancing, I can stay home. I don't have to go in there. I can shop somewhere else. We've often, throughout our history, and it's what made America great, was to let people and individuals make those choices. And so that's one of the things that struck me about each one of your efforts, is that you're trying to let the people reinvigorate the rights that have been kind of stamped on. So Jared, tell us a little bit of what you see as necessary in the opening of Gilbert, and then tell us how it's been received, your message, how it's been received.
Well, we wanted it to be an open letter so that everyone knew what our position was. And by and large, it's been received very, very well. There's certainly the naysayers that, blame me for, this death or that death, but they need to understand the big picture, that we've had more calls for domestic violence in the Gilbert Police Department once the lockdown or the stay-at-home orders started to descend. And it's a game of whack-a-mole, right? We're trying to flatten the curve to protect the hospitals, but we've also caused a whole series of social and economic events. So in terms of what I hope to accomplish, it's restoring some of that balance, right? Because we've severely imbalanced society right now, and not letting the natural, economy work and flow, and the natural way that we live our lives. On Sunday, I was on a call with some members of the church that I go to, and I was just so saddened to hear mostly the older people that are very much afraid of they're the risky population, right? And they're the ones that really need to stay home. But these people want to see their children. They want to see their grandchildren, but they're living in this culture of fear right now, where in Arizona, we don't necessarily have the data that actually supports all of these wild claims for fear. I get in some places like New York City, you could probably make the case. I've got a brother that lives there, and they are seeing some serious issues. And he's known some people that have died. But here in Arizona, where we don't have the data, especially in Gilbert, there isn't a state of emergency. There is no data that shows that we have a state of emergency to justify the taking of people's individual liberties. So I hope at least we can start with Gilbert and opening up the parks. I mean, that's a layup. There's no reason why we need to close the restrooms. We need to close the basketball courts, tennis courts. And I know the mayor and the town manager are working on that. That is one piece of feedback that I did get, and very happy to see that's in progress. But that can be done straight away. Another thing that I think we can do, and we'll need the governor's help on this, is certainly opening up to all businesses, right? This idea that some are essential and none are, that is just condescending, that is arrogant, everybody that is doing something good. Capitalism is a beautiful thing. They're there to serve somebody else. But number two, and I'll just leave it at this, I'd love to hear other people's thoughts, is it is completely inappropriate for us to enforce either through code compliance or police and put somebody in jail or give them a $2,500 fine for opening up their business and trying to provide for their families. They have a God-given right to work and produce, and that's the beauty of capitalism, is because they can share their talents and their labors with others, and everybody benefits in that transaction. For someone to come in, and frankly, I made the constitutional point that in Article 1, only Congress has the ability to regulate commerce. Now, that's specifically between states, but we have businesses that buy and sell outside of the state of Arizona. The mayor doesn't have authority to shut that down. The governors don't have the authority to do that. The president of the United States doesn't have that authority. Only Congress has that authority constitutionally in Article 1, Section 8. And the whole point of the Interstate Commerce Clause, or the Commerce Clause, is to promote commerce. It's not to restrict it. Unfortunately, that's been perverted over the many, many years. And so to really get back to some of those ideas and reflecting on what we can do to restore some of those liberties that have been taken away during this unfortunate time.
Yeah, well, thanks, Jared, and I appreciate your insight there. And Jake, tell us about what you asked about. How's that been received?
Yeah, so it's been received well, and I'm actually very grateful to Queen Creek staff, specifically our town manager John Cross, our assistant manager Bruce Gardner. They have been exceptionally receptive to the feedback that I've given them and that other members of council have given them on this topic. And they recognize that when this situation first began, the models that the leading public health experts in the country were giving us were that this was going to be a society-stopping event, right? And what they're seeing now, and this goes to a point that that Councilman Taylor made, is they're seeing that those models have been wildly incorrect. Even, Majority Leader Peterson, State Majority Leader Peterson made this point on the radio the other day, that even the lowest of the low projections that Arizona public health officials put out, we're far below those, right? And so what staff is recognizing, both through, coaching and feedback from council, but also just by the nature of common sense, is that the cure has become far worse than the disease. And so something that Councilman Taylor mentioned, I was reading a university study the other day, and it said that for each 1% increase in the annual unemployment rate, approximately 21 additional suicides per 100,000 of the population could be expected. If that's true, for each 1% increase, that's the potential for 69,000 additional suicides. There are economic correlations like that on substance abuse, on anxiety, on domestic violence, on child abuse. And so we have to look at significantly more than simply the coronavirus models and the cases, in terms of what impact this is truly having. And so I'm proud to say that in Queen Creek, I just finalized with staff and with the mayor a proclamation supporting the reopening of Queen Creek businesses that tomorrow night at our council meeting will be on the agenda, and I expect to be able to read. And I'll just give you a couple of excerpts from it. Section 1, so it says, "Now therefore be it resolved, proclaimed, and declared as follows." Section 1, the town council recognizes that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, that shall not be suspended during times of emergency, and in accordance with our oath of office, we will always support and defend the rights and liberties enshrined within it. And it goes on quickly to Section 2, which says the Queen Creek Town Council urges Governor Ducey to remove the remaining business operating restrictions and accelerate the reopening for all businesses in the state.
That's fantastic.
I think that sums it up nicely for where Queen Creek's at on this.
That's great, and I hope it passes, and I hope that you can get that to Governor Ducey and that he would heed your call. Councilman Stewart, tell me, how's been the response in your letter to Governor Ducey?
From the community, amazing. we're fortunate in Chandler. We have an amazing community. We have a community that's involved and that's connected with their elected officials. I think the most interesting thing about all this is that I'm optimistic about what will come from this. I've heard people that I never would have thought talk about the 10th Amendment, speak about the 10th Amendment. I've heard people talk about states' rights and the fact that in some cases that the cities serve at the state, right? We serve the state as cities, but chartered cities have a little bit more strength to make their own choices, et cetera. But the community's been amazing. And here's how I know, is that when the fear started, when we were all nervous about what was going to be happening, and there were people, screaming from the rooftops that, everything was gonna end, people took the recommendations of our government and from our healthcare officials and from leaders in the community to settle down, to stay home, and they honored that commitment. And so I know that we can do things quickly and on a dime in Chandler to be able to recover. And I think from that, knowing what our community did when that all was going down, I think now I know that when we turn the lights back on, we'll be able to hit the ground running. I think people will be energized. I think some of the liquidity that was created through the PPP is starting to hit some of our small business owners finally. That was slow. But I think from that liquidity, from the fact that our community believes in themselves, and it's a hardworking community, I think we're going to be able to tilt the nose of the plane up very quickly. This economy will recover. And the lessons learned from all this is like, wait a second, the next time this happens, let's get some data, because bad data in is bad data out. And we made a lot of knee-jerk reactions based on things that were going on in Italy and things that were going on in New York. And they didn't really apply. Heck, the things that were going on in Phoenix didn't apply to Chandler, and they certainly didn't apply to Queen Creek. So I think next time, hopefully there'll never be a next time. But if something like this happens again, what I'd like to see is the same thing that happened in Chandler, is more representative form of government where the governor says, hey, supervisors, tell me what's going on in your community. Talk to your mayors, what's going on there, and we can make we can do hard things, make a piecemeal shutdown based on what's going on. And I know people say, well, then Gilbertonians will just come to Chandler parks. Well, we'll deal with that. But we can't have what just happened happen again in Arizona, or much less the United States. But there'll be positive things that come from this. I know Chandler as a community is ready to get going, and I'm just asking our small business owners to hang on just a little bit longer. I think the governor is going to move forward here pretty quickly, and we'll be able to turn the lights back on. And the good thing is that we all know to be safe. And so it still is a virus that can hurt grandma and grandpa. It can hurt me. It can hurt my family. And so we do need to be careful, wash our hands, and do all those things that the CDC has directed. And so we'll follow those directions if given. But hopefully people will start talking about the Constitution a little bit more, and we'll get that back. So that could be the blessing. Yeah,
it's you got to look for the silver lining in all this, and that may be a good way to look. I just want to provide some context for people, because we need to understand that some people still are gripped with concerns and fear, perhaps coming back, whether they should open their business or not, whether they should go out and patronize someplace or not. But I want to give some real context. This is a very recent data. This is updated every day, and it is the critical data, and it is the case fatality rate per 1 million in your population. So you really get it. We're going to have more. We have the most in the world. Why? First of all, we have more accurate records than, say, China, but also we have more people, and so that doesn't mean that your ratio is different. So the lowest industrialized nation in the world and a case fatality rate per 1 million population is none other than the United States of America. America has done a better job than any other nation. The number of tests done, America is far and away on a per capita basis ahead of anybody else. America's done a really good job, but the context that is here is you'll hear somebody say, well, Sweden has more case fatalities than Norway. Of course they do. They have a little over twice as many people in Sweden as there are in Norway. But when you take it on the per million, Sweden is the second lowest of industrialized nations. And how did they approach it? They approached it in a way that said, we're going to keep our economy open, and we're going to try to get our most vulnerable population to shelter in place. And similarly, you have Taiwan. Taiwan has yesterday when I checked, they had 6 fatalities and fewer than 500 COVID-19 cases in a population bigger than Arizona's by far, and in a much tighter congested area 80 miles off the shore of China. So, I mean, these are things that we should put in context. The other context is exactly what all of you have been talking about, is the societal problems that happen when you have an economic recession or depression. And we have 30 million. That number up this week when you get a new set of unemployment claims will be about 32 to 33 million. And probably by the 15th of May, we'll be at 35 million for 2 reasons. Number one, you talk about flattening the curve. We haven't flattened the curve and opened up enough to bring people back, number one. And number two, most states haven't had the capacity to deal with all of the new unemployment claims. Our GDP, our gross product, what we produce as a country as a whole, is contracting by almost 5% in the first quarter. You add those 2 things together, and the fact that we have borrowed $4 trillion in this fiscal year, and know that we are probably going to be asked to borrow another $2 to $4 trillion, depending on whose bills get through in Congress, you begin to see that we have a very complex, very difficult problem to solve. But in a way, it comes back to Main Street, who we represent. We represent people who invest life savings, whose retirement is based on this, who mortgage their house to open up businesses. And we are telling them, regardless of what you thought your rights were, we're not going to let you open up your business. And that's shame on us, because what that's done is, by the way, I've talked to every one of your first responders in the last couple of weeks, your chiefs, and they all have echoed what Councilmember Taylor said is happening in Gilbert. Domestic violence has gone up. You saw a spike in suicides. Now it's kind of coming back down. Hopefully it'll stay down. You have more opioid use. You have more alcohol use. You have more child abuse. We've got to take care of that. And that's why I appreciate the efforts that the each of you have made with your councils and your communities. And so I'm going to give each of you 1 or 2 minutes to just kind of wrap up. Jared, I'll come back to you. We started with you. I'll tell you what, we'll go back to Councilmember Stewart, and then we'll go to Jake, and then we'll go to you, Jared. That way you got the first and the last, and you're kind of like a sandwich with 2 wonderful meats in between.
I don't know how you follow that. I think what I hope that my community, our community, hears through all this is that self-governance is the key, being smart, and when we get good data, to use that data. But I want to commend a few people in the city of Chandler. One, council and our mayor. Our fire chief has been basically our health director through this entire thing, Chief DeWiggins. He has started meeting with us. We started meeting about 6 weeks ago, every week, and he gave us a rundown of where the cases were, where the hot spots might be, some things to look out for. And he kept us in the know on what was going on in Chandler so we could react quickly. We're at the ground level. So we're talking to business owners. We're talking to scared parents, grandparents. We had nursing homes that were struggling. We were providing PPE, where we recently started providing PPE to some of those nursing homes that were running low. We had the ability to make changes on the fly in Chandler, and we reacted nimbly. And I'm really proud of our community for doing that, our city manager and everybody getting together. The great thing about Chandler and what we did, and I think the East Valley as a whole, is that we all kind of locked arms and we started, okay, we got some work to do. And we all just started talking, and we over-communicated, and we basically shared with our community what we were doing at every step of the way. I think the biggest key now, and maybe if I can get you gentlemen on the phone a little bit later, I'd like to find out what y'all are doing with your budgets, because there's going to be some some hard decisions to make as it relates to, we're fortunate we're not laying anybody off or furloughing anybody because we've always saved for a rainy day. We have priority-based budgeting. So if we can't pay for it 20 years from now, we don't buy it today. That's just the way Chandler runs business. It's why businesses from around the country are coming to the East Valley or coming to Chandler, because they know they can count us to have water, and we can still build roads, and we can make all the things work in tragic times like today. So that's my little plug for our business community for Chandler. If you're watching this from other cities, Chandler's open for business, and we have A-rated schools and top school district in the state. Anyway, I'll pass.
Spoken like a true
guys.
Thanks, Mark. Jake, Councilman Hoffman, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Look, here's my last comments. It's Americans are strong. America is a country that we battled communism. We overcame socialist Nazi Germany. We are incredibly strong as a people. And it would be absolutely tragic to allow China's coronavirus to make us as a people abandon the very principles that make us exceptional. I mean, Reagan called us the shining city upon a hill. If we allow this crisis to subvert the very constitutional liberties that make us free, we're effectively proclaiming to the world that we're not that beacon of freedom. And that's just not okay. My salvo is, now's the moment that we have to stand strong, that all Americans have to stand strong for liberty. And not just each of us individually, we have to demand the same from our elected officials. We have to demand the same of our colleagues in office, because, the simple fact of the matter is that our children are watching, our colleagues are watching, our community is watching, history is watching, and America is still the beacon of freedom. We are still that nation, and we cannot allow this to ruin that.
Thanks, Councilman Hoffman. Appreciate that. Councilman Taylor.
Andy, thanks for having us and enjoyed the conversation here. Let me just make a couple of points here. First off, as you know, Governor Ducey's a great man. He wants the best. He loves this state. I know that. You know that. We both worked with him in different capacities. I know the other two council members. And same thing with our good mayor and the good councils, both of Gilbert and Queen Creek. We're really lucky to have great neighbors like Queen Creek and Chandler. And I know even though we might have differences of opinions and approaches differently, we're dealing with good people with good intentions for the most part. And I want to compliment them. That's a lot of hard work that Governor Ducey and Mayor Daniels and other people have done to communicate and analyze. And so I hope that, they'll take some of these additional pieces of input as reflections from and requests from our small businesses in the right light, that we want to help and we want to continue to restore the liberties that just make us so great, free and prosperous. So that's one point. Another point that's important, just to build on Councilman Hoffman's well-articulated point there, is freedom works, right? And capitalism works. And what's really going to get us out of this isn't the heavy hand of government or the jackboot of some order from Washington, D.C., right? Those things don't work. They cause so much collateral damage in society and the economy. We just can't fall into that trap. We've seen that in our history so many times. And we absolutely cannot go back to that failed model. We need to go back to what's working, right? Capitalism is the only real thing that solves societal problems. They are the best, most efficient way, even though there's thrash in capitalism, to solve societal issues. And we should rely on that. We should have faith in our freedoms. We should have faith in our liberties, faith in our citizens to make good choices for their own families. We are Americans that care about each other. Sometimes we get this narrative that we have to lock everything up because Americans are too dumb to care for each other. The opposite is actually true. And I just have great faith both in the citizens of Gilbert and the people of America that when we let them express their liberties, they will provide the best solutions, not just in the marketplace, but also in society. So that's that. And then this is the 100th birthday for Gilbert. No one ever thought we'd be celebrating it like this. So we are very anxious in Gilbert to reopen our businesses, get out of our homes, celebrate the 100th birthday of this wonderful, beautiful community that we live in. And Congressman, you're going to be invited to all the fun celebrations. July is the month that we have our 100th birthday officially. And we're going to invite our neighbors and just look forward to another wonderful 100 years here in Gilbert. So, Congressman, thanks for having us on this discussion.
I thank each of you, and I thank each of you for your leadership. We do live in great communities, and it's an honor to serve. And with that, thank you so much. Thanks for anybody who's been joining us. We really appreciate it, and we hope to catch you soon. Thanks, everyone.